This is a great day, and I don't want to lose sight of the big picture here. This all started at a conference that we had in this building on October the 4th. I think every office of the board offices was represented there. Virtually every department of the county was represented there. The mayor's office of the city of Los Angeles, Pasadena, Long Beach were represented. The mayor of Santa Monica was there. Every department head of all of our human service agencies was there. It was sponsored by Common Ground and underwritten by the Rockefeller Foundation. And we brought in people who, from all over the country, who had done best practices, successful homeless reintegration programs around the country, not just in New York, but Atlanta, Denver, San Francisco, San Diego, Houston. We all sat around, about 50, 75 of us. Phil Mangano, the president's homeless, whatever his title is, his homeless czar, was here. And we all sat around the room for a whole day. And all of the people who had come in from out of town had gone down to Skid Row to take a look. And at the end of the day, when all of our folks were looking at each other and say, what could we do? The consensus of opinion of the people from out of town as well as our own people was we can't do anything meaningful on homeless until we start to address in a constructive way what's happening on Skid Row. And they all recommended we try to focus on Skid Row. And what came out of that from our professionals, not from any of the political leaders, but from the professionals, was the idea of Project 50. And that idea was identify the 50 most vulnerable people on Skid Row. People who've been there the longest, the people who are the sickest, the people who have accessed our jails and our prisons and our emergency rooms and our hospitals the most, who are running up a public tab the most. Literally the most vulnerable people on Skid Row. Let's identify the 50 most vulnerable. Give ourselves 100 days to put together a program, identify who they are, and then go after them and bring them into permanent supportive housing and see if we can replicate what's been done, not just in New York, but in these other cities and counties that I mentioned. Today is day number 98. So you've made it with 2 days to spare. Not that if you had missed it by 2 days, I would not have criticized you or ourselves, but I think it just shows, and one of the most wonderful things about this exercise is not just that I hope we're going to get some serious results in Skid Row, but it's having watched what happens when you set a deadline. People who are usually vilified by critics from outside, that we sit on our butts and we don't do anything and we're inaccessible and all this stuff, and watch how department heads and really their subordinates, much more than the department heads, when liberated to do what they came into this business to do in the first place, and that is to help people, to see how much they can do. And Marv, your people have been incredible, going out in the streets at 4 in the morning, interviewing the 471 identified homeless persons that we found on Skid Row, and the DCFS people who were there, and the DPSS people who were there, and the CAOs, CEOs people who were there, everyone who was involved. And what's happened here, Bill Fujioka said it well, and I want to reiterate the point, that this has been more of an integrated project I've seen around here in a long time, of departments talking to each other instead of past each other, and really wanted to get things done. And so if nothing else happens out of this, and I think there's going to be plenty that's going to come out of this, one of the things that has already happened is this kind of integrated, we talk about it, we have big papers about our long-range plans, but you've executed an integrated service delivery plan that is taking shape on the streets of Skid Row, and that could not have happened without a bunch of dedicated folks. So congratulations so far to all of you, and I mean, it's taken a long time. Skid Row is not something that popped up in the last 5, 10, or 15 years. It's been there since I was born, if not before. In one way or another, it's been a problem and a stain on the Los Angeles society, as similar concentrations of disadvantaged individuals, whether homeless or otherwise, over the decades in other communities around the country. And we're a little, we're getting around to doing something about it, and I think it's going to be significant. The 50 is not the important thing, because I think what's happened in this project is that we've said to ourselves collectively that if we can get to these 50 and do it right, we'll get to the next 450. And we've now set the template, or we will have set the template over the months ahead of how to deal with 50, 500, God willing, 5,000. We have 23,000, it's estimated. It's probably an exaggeration. 23,000 chronically homeless persons on the streets of Los Angeles County. Now, they used to say they had 3,000 people on Skid Row. It turns out we found only 471, and I think you guys did a pretty exhaustive census at 4 in the morning before the LAPD roused them out of their shanty towns. But nevertheless, I think we have an opportunity to really implode this problem in a constructive way, as they did in Times Square. I went to Times Square in May, and I met with Roseanne Haggerty of Common Ground. It's one of the best 4 hours I've spent in my life, and I encourage every member. I think many of the staffs of my staff had been there already. That's how I found out about Roseanne. And I encourage every member of this board, next time you're in that part of the country, to go and see what they've done. The Times Square Hotel, which is one model, it's not the only way to do it, is on 43rd Street, around the corner from the most famous address in the United States, Times Square. Houses some 600 or thereabouts individuals from A to Z with all kinds of problems, on-site, one-stop, wraparound services, from mental health to substance abuse to everything else. And they just don't take failure, they don't consider failure an option. And in response to the questions about the substance abuse, which I have concerns about too, the bottom line is, like a John Wooden full court press, you're just all over these individuals all the time, and you just don't let them slip. And they will slip. Gloria Molina said it right. It's just like our kids. I mean, you do the best you can, and sometimes they slip. The question isn't to get all excited about when they slip, but how do we respond when they slip, and if we're there to catch them? And to get them into a position where they can be stable, constructive, conventional participants in our society, and that's the ultimate goal. I don't know whether I was out of the room when this discussion started. I don't think you've gone through some of the statistics, but I think it's important for the public to understand, because they listen, who we're talking about. Who are these 50 people that were identified over a 10-day period in December between 4 a.m. and 6 a.m.? 90% of these individuals have been in the county jail. 42% have been in state prison. Of the 50 most vulnerable, our top 50 list, 76%, 3 out of 4 reported a history of mental health issues through previous treatment or hospitalizations. 90% of the top 50, 90%, almost all of them, had a history of substance abuse. 35% of the people sleeping on Skid Row had reported being victims of violent attacks. The average age of these top 50 is 53 years of age. 72% are African American. 22% are veterans of the United States military. Almost 1 in 4 of the most vulnerable people on Skid Row answered the call of their country when their country called, and now they're sleeping on the streets of downtown. 53% have been hospitalized in public hospitals, or their equivalent in the neighborhood. 54%, if I can read my own handwriting, have no health insurance. Over half have no health insurance currently. Hopefully some of them will be able to get enrolled. This is one of the goals. 59%, almost 60%, have been in emergency rooms. Now, I did a quick calculation yesterday that between the hospitalizations and the emergency room visits of these top 50, and it's not that they were in the hospital once or in the emergency room once, these were repeated visits to emergency rooms over the last 3 months, that the estimate that I calculated, and I may be off, was somewhere between $1.75 million and $2 million cost to the public treasury, whether it's us or the state. It's mostly us because they're mostly uninsured. Almost $2 million in cost just for the emergency room and hospitalizations of these 50 individuals in the last year. Just these 50, not the other 421 that didn't make the top 50.